Hi, and welcome to Dandy After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I have a very special guest. You might know him as my pain in the ass co host, Paul from the Paulcast. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me, and such a fantastic and nice intro as usual.
That was me
Nothing.
pumping you up.
Yeah, I know.
I had another one prepared, but this one I went with the positives.
So because I'm sitting in this seat, am I supposed to say hello to everyone, or are you still going to do that?
You know what? Yeah, let's put you to work. Let's go ahead.
All right. Hello, everybody in the chat and everybody not in the chat. How are you? I hope you all had a good weekend. No, I'm just kidding. What is up, Dylan and Kane and James? What's up, Chris? Hey, Troy. Hello, Carol. Hello, Renee. What's up, Corey? What's up, Fiddlebits? AZ Mick, how you doing? K-Dog and Russell. How are you all doing? Russell, it's been a minute, I think. I don't think I've seen Russell in a little bit. I hope you're doing well. And tonight, what are we talking about, Danny?
Oh man, tonight. Well, first, I have to say, Dylan, when I saw this comment that you left hours ago, it like made my day. And I don't know if you're on social media, but like I went to try to find you to message you and be like, oh my God. And then I couldn't find you. So I maybe if you're under a different name, then I might have missed it, but I love that comment. And I think we have somebody new in here too. Who is this? Because I thought I knew somebody who was really cool named Corey, but then I heard he's going to like a really shitty concert.
Who's he going to see?
Nickelback.
Oh, really?
Oh,
that's all right.
My heart just like sunk.
Nickelback are far better at their instruments than the music that they put out. They're professionals, but they're Nickelback.
Danny, fun fact, in high school, I dated this kid. Yeah, it didn't last many weeks at all. It was why I wasted my time, I don't know. But like the first time we hung out at his place, he played drums and he was like, oh, I've been working on this song. Can I play it? And I'm like, yeah, it was a fucking Nickelback song.
Oh man, you were just like, take me now.
Yeah, no, it was the opposite effect.
Effect.
I was like, yeah, nope, I'm good with that.
Oh man.
So
why do they think he committed suicide?
We're going to get into that. Give me my Nickelback. They suck.
Nice.
So, okay, for those who don't know, I think we need to start with what we were told and what news broke yesterday. So I have to say, I was at the Pride Parade in Boston yesterday with a whole bunch of my girlfriends. And shout out to the Liz who did a collab with me for the Boston Marathon bombing Netflix documentary. She texted me, oh my God, did you hear Ted Kaczynski died today? And I was like, no, I'm out. I haven't been online. And then as soon as she sent me that, y'all, I was getting message after message after message. It was like, oh my God, I love how everybody thought to message me. So, no, you're not. So what we learned yesterday, June 10th, 2023, was Ted Kaczynski was found dead in his cell. He was then brought to the hospital, but was pronounced dead around 8 a.m. So he was 81 years old. And for those who are living under a rock and don't know, he was the man known as the Unabomber, who was serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for a series of bombings across the U.S. that end up killing 3 people. So the FBI did confirm that, yes, he is deceased. And what I forgot to, I can't remember. So I covered Ted Kaczynski on my show in a 2-part, like a year ago or so, and I did post the links. But he was transferred to a maximum security Colorado prison in 2021 because his health was declining. So that's something to keep in mind. As of yesterday, the cause of death had not been released. Flash forward to today. So, Paul, you're in Canada. What have you heard about this?
Basically what anyone else has heard about it. It's been right down the middle from he died in a medical facility to he committed suicide and was found in his cell, which I think was in the medical facility. I think he was like in a medical facility, wasn't he?
Yes, it was but it was still technically a prison cell in a medical facility, but it wasn't like a hospital room.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So, and that's a weird one, because I guess if he was really sick and he just decided enough's enough, then that makes sense to why I'd do it. But he was 81 and he hasn't been in good health for a super long time, I don't think. So it seems like one of those really random things. I don't think let's not go crazy. It's not like CIA came in and suicided him. What the fuck what sense would that make? Because he's 81 years old. He's been alive for a long time. To say a bunch of stuff, but we'll get a little more into the CIA aspect of this case as well.
Yeah, so he was suffering from late stage cancer.
Right.
And so he was unresponsive in his cell. His cell was at the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina. So he was found at 12:30 a.m. Emergency responders performed CPR, and they did revive him before he was transported to a hospital where he was pronounced dead again later Saturday morning. What I found interesting was, like, you make a great point. He was 81 years old. Why now?
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's interesting that you mentioned the CIA thing. In kind of researching for tonight, there are a lot of articles comparing him to Epstein. And I'm like, what the hell?
Comparing who?
Ted Kaczynski.
People
were like making
nothing.
Something happened to Jeffrey Epstein. Could the same thing have happened to Ted Kaczynski? And I'm like, that's where people on the internet just need to slow the fuck down.
They dial it back. Yeah, that's crazy.
So I think we're both in agreement here. There was no Epstein situation involved.
He would have been, because Epstein was suicided right away. Right? Like it wasn't like a big, long, drawn out thing. They didn't wait 81 years and then, oh yeah, the Unabomber. Oh shit, we better go get that guy. It wasn't like nothing like that.
Epstein had secrets on people. Kaczynski didn't.
No, Kaczynski was his own thing. Kaczynski was another guy who thought that he had the answer, but he was exactly the same as the stuff that he was fighting against. Like putting his will on people through violence and fucking with other people. Like, it's just like, there's so many good ideas and there's things that have come to pass that are in his manifesto, but then there's just the 25% of it that's just nonsense, and that it's just what's the word I'm looking for? He's just totally contradicting himself.
Yeah.
It's just, Yep. Anyway.
So let's see. Sam just joined us. He will be sorely missed by you, maybe.
Yeah.
Let's see. Dylan says, I think Joe Biden accidentally signed his death warrant thinking he was signing a bill making stairs illegal. Jesus Christ. Hey, James, imagine the death toll if all of his bombs went off prop. Oh my gosh, James. Absolutely.
Yeah, no kidding. I watched a bit of the Unabomber in his own words documentary from Reels today, and I was listening to his manifesto as well, just kind of like prepping for going into this. It was bloody genius that the FBI put out his manifesto for people to see his handwriting and his ideas, and then his sister-in-law picking it out. Well, his brother and his sister-in-law picking it out and busting him.
Gotta stop you right there with your misinformation, hun.
Oh, what did I do?
What did you do? What didn't you do? So the FBI did not, if you watched Danny After Dark, you've had a year to watch these episodes, but I digress. They did not put out his manifesto just so people could see his writing. They did it because he had said he would stop the attacks.
Right.
So they did it just in the hopes to prevent more attacks.
I don't know if they would have, if they had thought that they could get a lead on him by not publishing it. I think they wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize I left a cat in the room.
Oh man, you locked the cat in. Oh dear.
Well, you're in here. So which one is it?
He had an IQ comparable to Hawking and Einstein. He is
Mm-hmm.
so smart. And the thing is, like, people that smart, like, how could you even, no wonder he wanted to just be away from everyone. How could you identify with anybody? Like, the rest of us are all like window lickers compared to him. Like, he's talking to us and it's just like talking to somebody who's about to start chewing on drywall.
Oh God. So one thing that I want to just make note of in case this does, because it wouldn't be just to neglect this comment. So when Ted was indicted, a federal grand jury indicted Ted Kaczynski in April 1996. So we're going way back, right? On 10 counts of illegally transporting, mailing, and using bombs. He was also charged with killing 3 people. January 7th, 1998, Selena's going to walk in front of the camera. Ted attempted to hang himself in prison. He tried to use his underwear to hang himself. So he did try to commit suicide once before. Okay. Do you want to say hi?
Hello.
This is Selena.
Selena Kyle.
So that was not successful. He was caught and he was saved. He was able to avoid the death penalty by pleading guilty to all the government's charges just 15 days later on January 22nd, 1998. Later, Kaczynski tried to withdraw his guilty plea, arguing it was involuntary. So the point of that is he did try to commit suicide before, but that was before he was able to avoid the death penalty. So from 98 till now, nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but I mean, the only thing that pops into my head for that is if all of a sudden he started getting way sicker real quick, and he just decided he wasn't into it anymore, which is like, I mean, it's kind of bullshit because he fucked so many people up, and he then he ran away from the pain of it.
That's just like a Wednesday night for you, though.
Yeah. That's a different kind of asphyxiation, James.
Hey, Beckham.
Hey, Beckham.
So
hey,
you mentioned earlier the Unabomber manifesto. So yeah, I do own it. It's I think I got this on Amazon for like $10, and it's only 97 pages. Without the note section, it's only 87 pages. So it's it's a short read, but you actually have to pay attention because it's very compact. And you said you actually listened to it earlier today?
It's on Audible.
Okay. So tell us what you took from it, because I haven't read it in a little bit, but I kind of have my notes on it. But you go.
Mine will be all over the place. I took a lot of him being like, don't let the government tell you what to do. We've become soft because of all of the technology. We start to make problems for ourselves because we're bored and our brains aren't working at full capacity because we're relying too much on technology. And a lot of stuff was kind of like reminiscent of the Atwa stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, he's saying, like, he talks a lot about how the left is trying to find reasons to be upset about things. He talks a lot about basically he's talking about cancel culture before there was cancel culture.
Right.
And then he also goes into it about just about your, like, looking at freedom in different ways. Like, is somebody impacting your freedom? The government is totally fine giving you certain freedoms. Like, you can go and bitch on the internet, you can do certain things, but they're things that don't get in the way of the government and the higher ups doing what they do and, like, making technology and furthering the technological society. And I mean, a lot of that, like, I get. There's a lot of, like, he's really radical with all this stuff. It's like, but at the same time, too, like what, like I had said about him wanting people to, like, there just to be smaller groups and everybody leaves each other alone. But then he goes and he doesn't want people telling him what to do. But then he'll go ahead and be like, if you don't do what I want you to do, then I'll blow you up.
Yeah.
So it just, like, that's the giant, huge hypocritical part of the whole thing. But there's lots of parts, like, to do with, with nature, with how, with society in general. Like, he had some really good points.
Yep.
But yeah, you start to see the hypocrisy real quickly when you're reading it.
Yep. Zesty Washington joined us. Hello. Dylan hasn't read it. You really should, Dylan.
Yeah.
It's a great read. It really is. Let's see. James comments on the whole current woke thing is Western society being too comfy, spoiled, and bored.
100%. I think a lot of stuff is that Yomni Pak woman, I think, or Yemeni Pak. She escaped from North Korea, but she's like a real right winger, but she talks a lot about stuff like that and makes a lot of sense of it. She's like, we had to, like, eat rats, and it's like, you guys are bitching because somebody who didn't know they were supposed to call you something didn't call you that thing. And so it's just like, yeah, we're a bunch of, the West are like spoiled teenagers. And we act like it, no matter how good we are, we're all super spoiled, because, like, we can drive around, like, you'll see people in Canada driving around with, like, fuck Trudeau and all this stuff all over their trucks, and, like, in certain places you would get killed for that. And so it's like, you're bitching about freedom, and it's like, you don't even know what it is. It's crazy. And so he talks a lot about that sort of stuff. He, like, the way that he put together the bombs and left no trace, like, not on the tape, not on anything, no hair. There was no hair in it, and he was a hairy fella. There was no fingerprints. There was nothing. He was very meticulous with it, but the bombs were very basic isn't the right word. They were, what's the word I'm looking for? They were pretty Mickey Mouse, pretty slapped together. But
yeah, he had to use what he had.
They weren't super sophisticated.
No.
But he had some that didn't go off quite the way that he wanted, but he was able to injure over 20 people and kill 3. And he's like, and I know that, like, some people are like, he was trying to help the environment and blah, blah, blah. Let's not go crazy here. The guy in his diary.
Manifesto?
His diary.
Oh, his diary. Okay, sorry.
In his diary, he talks about he came across, well, this woman talks about it and then says that he wrote about it in his diary. His neighbor came around a corner and her 3-year-old daughter was standing there, and he had a gun pointed at her. And anyway, it's whatever happens, and she gets her daughter away, and they go. And later, when everything happens and they talk to her, she finds out that there was a bit of his diary that said, I could have killed the little bitch, but then the big bitch would have run away. It's like, I could have killed the big bitch, but then the little bitch might have escaped, or might have something of that. And, like, he was just like, the only reason he didn't kill them and a 3-year-old girl was because they were too close to his house. Oh yeah, and he put false clues in as well, James. You're right. Yeah, false clues in his bombs to try and throw people off, like RV. He put something about RV, and so they looked for all the people with the initials RV. And some different stuff like that. It was interesting.
So there's a few comments, just a little bit more behind. So I want to reference Dylan says Wadey tried to commit suicide to avoid the death penalty. Reminds me of the old law one I heard of where punishment for being caught trying to commit suicide, they would be hung.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Corey says, was he a virgin? I don't know. He did date someone, but I don't know.
Who knows? In college, before he ended up going into that program.
We'll talk about that. We have an article to read. K-Dog says he would have had much more of an impact if he had written and lectured his views instead of murdering people.
For sure.
He did teach. And he was just, he wouldn't like his office hours. He did not care.
He did not like people. He did not have any interest in helping people. He was like a narcissist, and he was a psychopath. Mm-hmm. He was just like, he had this incredible brain and this incredible intellect, but he was too damaged, or he couldn't handle it. Like some people can't, that there's that fine line between genius and insanity, right? And then he goes and does that testing, and the stuff that they did, they talked about him being schizophrenic, and some of the stuff they did in that program, if you're schizophrenic and you have paranoia anyway, that'll send you right over the edge. And we'll talk more about it again in a few.
There's a lot to talk about with Ted Kaczynski. It's not just like a simple cut and dry case.
No, he was on the lam for so long, from the 70s to the 90s. 70s to the 90s. That's a fucking reign of terror.
So he was diagnosed as schizophrenic by a psychiatrist.
Right.
So that we do say, but he was adamant he wasn't mentally ill. Like his attorney tried to do reason by guilty by reason of insanity, and he's like, no.
Like, no, I'm perfectly fine. He was 100% bought into what he was saying, but it was all bullshit. Yeah. It was, but underlined with, it's like, it's like Manson's rap. There's so much stuff that you could say, like, live in the now, all this sort of stuff, but then he like raped people. Right? Yeah. Like it's really tough when you got somebody who can be brilliant, can have moments of brilliance, but they're too far on the other side of things. And he was all about not being a part of society. Same with Manson and them. But it was kind of a big thing with that, with all those people in the communes and stuff. And he was really like, he was more Atwa than Atwa. He was like, could you imagine if him and Sandra Good got together?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
There'd be none of us left. We'd be it would be all trees. It would be all trees.
God. But you make excellent points. Oh God, I hate.
Yeah.
Oh, vomit. So his manifesto. So for those who haven't read it, it's interesting, and because if you read a lot of reviews on it, or even law enforcement, when this case first broke and they realized who it was and all of that, I found personally, as I read it, it's like, okay, I'm on board with this. I'm on board with this. Like, to me, like 70-80% of it it's amazing. It's clear that he cares about the environment, and he would have been such a great force in the Atwa movement, like you said. Mm-hmm. But when he, like, as his manifesto goes on, I feel like you hit a point where he just starts to turn, and it's like, I can agree with you up until there, but then when he turns, it's drastic, because it goes from talking about his disappointment and anger from when living on the land, and then there was this spot he loved to visit, and then one day he goes, and what do you know, now society has taken it over, and now they're paving roads and all, which was common back then, but he just goes to, now we must stop this by any point necessary, including violence. And it's a sharp turn. And then you can't really get on board with anything else. And I mean, some people do by reading this, but he just had so much to offer, and he really went far, far left. And it's such a shame because a lot of it was great. He clearly cared about society, but yeah, when he says again, violence against people, any point necessary for this, he gives examples of how to take out. I mean, he gets graphically violent.
Yeah. No, it's pretty intense.
Let's see. Hey, Renee.
But lots of times, he called a lot of things in that book. Far as, because from when it came out, as far as like, people not being able to communicate properly, people being lost in their technology, and fucking
look at us now.
Look at us now. We're all so soft, and we're all so entitled, and we all are like locked into our phone. Hardly any of us.
Speak for yourself, but okay.
Hardly any of us can think for ourselves. It's like, well, it's like, and he talked about like herd mentality. Like there's a lot of people who aren't sure enough on their feet to not need a big group of people to be able to like, join up with and have to align your cause with them. Otherwise you can't do anything. One person can't make a change sort of thoughts. But that's what's interesting about this to me is the manifesto and the idea behind stuff, but how it went wrong and how radical he ended up. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about a neighbor with a 3-year-old. So I promoted this book or recommended it, I should say, in my true crime book recommendations. And when I did, I said it had become my favorite true crime book of all time. And I still stand by that. So it's Madman in the Woods, Life Next Door to the Unabomber by Jamie Gehring. This book, so she grew up as a child next to Ted Kaczynski, and she talks about like looking at it through the lens of a child, but then once she learned, hey, he's the Unabomber, then looking it back with those glasses on and seeing all these instances where, my quirky neighbor Ted, there were times their lives was in danger. And that 3-year-old that you're talking about was her little sister. So if anybody has not read this, do yourself a service. Buy this book, get it on Audible. It is so, so good. And she gives a perspective of somebody that we can't get that from anything else. You can't go onto Google and learn about Ted. She knew him for years, decades. So this is definitely a book worth looking at. Oh gosh, we have a whole bunch of comments. IOC probably thinks he's a
Who's AOC?
It's the Aaron's in love with her. Sorry, Beckham's in love with her.
Wait, is that the lady that was the that's so funny. Okay.
Yeah. I respectfully disagree with K-Dog that Ted would have had more impact if he had just lectured about his views. There are a lot of people who talk about dangers of tech and going back to the land.
And they don't. He did. If he had just done that and not bombed people, but like shown people that this is how I live. This is how like you can do it. But a lot of time. But the thing too is the reason they call him the Unabomber is because it was universities and airlines.
Yeah.
That's what they were talking about, right? But why didn't he go and like, I always wonder with people like, why don't they go to the spots or the sources like where there's actually stuff going on to do with environmentalism and like go blow that shit up? Like, he's talking about how the left thinks and attacking, I guess, because they're very, very left in the universities and stuff, right? So he was pushing back against that. But I don't see why he wouldn't go to like a refinery of some sort or something that actually he's like pushing against and go and bomb that. I never really got like, I don't know. But he's a psychopath.
Travel to these places. He would mail this stuff. So your point of why didn't he go here?
Well, why didn't he mail the bombs there? Why didn't he? Okay. Yeah, let me rephrase. Why didn't he send his bombs there? Why didn't he send them to like,
She's in the Reels documentary. Yes, she is. Chris, yes, she is.
Yeah.
Ted had the same psychiatrist as Timothy McVeigh, who was set up for the Oklahoma City bombing. Who was set up for?
I don't know anything about that.
Of course you wouldn't. Maybe Ted should have shouted at the world, "How dare you? How dare you?" It's rare for people to respectfully disagree these days. I'm impressed. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we try and on these channels. That's what we try and go for. A level of respect past, like, me respecting Danny. I don't really that's not something I try to do on a daily basis, But
yeah. Okay, so you guys are all mentioning AOC. Not one person said her name. I was waiting to see, and then we have a who's AOC. So all right. So that is Alexandria, and I'm going to butcher her last name, Ocasio-Cortez. So AOC, American politician.
Bartender becomes congresswoman for New York.
I mean, that's not how I would have described her, but you do
That's
you,
funny.
Renee. Let's see. There was someone made a point I wanted to. You're going to get timed out, Corey.
He is not. How dare you? I mean,
thank
I
you.
don't like
Thank
Nickelback
you.
as much
Thank
as
you. I just assume everybody knows who she is. So that, yeah. Oh, shit. There was something in my notes that I wanted to. Okay. So Jamie Gehring. So I follow her on Instagram, and I've actually talked with her about her book. She's, oh my God, you guys have to get this. Again, you get such a perspective of Ted from, again, from her as a child. So before she learns about the bombing, and you can tell as the book goes on, like how he just becomes more and more radicalized, and things he does as a kid, you can't quite put your finger on it, but looking back, you can. Mm-hmm. And so she did a post because obviously, so CrimeCon UK was this weekend. So Jamie Gehring was actually over there in England at CrimeCon UK. And the news broke about Ted. She's there promoting her book. So I actually, I messaged her, and so she did a Instagram post, and I thought it was I just wanted to read it. So, because again, she grew up, Ted was her neighbor. She put many feelings here. Complicated would be an understatement, but I'm processing it through some writing. And thank you to each and every person who messaged me, called, and sent links. I found out about Ted's passing while in London for the True Crime Awards. I know there is suspicion of suicide, but I knew his death was coming. May his passing bring some peace to the many lives affected by the Unabomber.
Who was that written by again?
Jamie Gehring.
Right.
She's the author of this book.
Yeah.
But imagine being over at CrimeCon and this news breaks.
That's crazy, especially
you're there promoting your book. And yeah. So, as she mentions that, she knew his death was coming. Like I said, he was in the late stages of cancer.
Right.
I don't know. So I really searched on the internet because today is you can just type Ted Kaczynski suicide, and there's all these rumors right now that he committed suicide. And all that we have to show is a source says.
Right.
Nothing else. There's not even he was found in this position. Nothing. And the truth will come in a few days once we learn the cause of death, because that has not been released. I personally don't think he did.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan. Welcome.
We got some cool stuff I'm going to post from Dan on the Manson side of things. He does a lot of really good genealogy, and he's really good at digging up information on people. So he's got a lot on Rosemary LaBianca's family and stuff that I'm going to put up. But so shout out to Dan.
Love Dan. Not so much you trying to steal the show and promote
Oh, shut up here. Anyway.
So what do you think, Paul? I mean, what is I know right now we're still in the early stages. His cause of death has not been released, but what are you thinking based on, again, his one suicide attempt, 1998? And now what we know, what are you thinking?
It seems weird. The only reason I would think that he would have committed suicide at this point is because he just had enough of being sick, or was just because, like, mainly that'll be the reason some people do it when they're that old, is because they've been living with this sickness for a long time and they get hit in a weak moment and do it. That being said, one of his whole things was being super tough, right? Like being strong and this and that. So but he did try and kill himself before he got so again, more hypocrisy on his end of things. So I see if things were getting rocky for him taking the easy way out. But I also think it's weird for an 81-year-old to commit suicide in prison.
I agree. And it looks like Renee's right there with us. If he were going to take himself out, it seems weird he would wait so long.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one thing that's like, well, if he was battling with any sort of inner demons or anything like that, you think they would have got him by the time he was 81. So I'd imagine it has something to do with his health. I think it's to spare himself something. It's not because he felt bad about anything. He was 81,
I
Russell.
Completely agree. Russell asks how old he was. So Ted was 81.
Yeah.
81. K-Dog, did he have any dirt on the Clintons? He was not Epstein's.
No.
There are articles saying, like, pointing in that direction, and I was just like, stop.
Because he was in a shady experiment when he was a kid, then that many years later that he's 81. Yeah, like they just forgot until now.
Yeah. I did, Paul, I know you you don't really listen to my channel because you're that type of friend. For those who were fuck off. For those that were here when I did my True Crime and Chill on Friday, I went on a big spiel because Paul, I don't know if you heard about this, for Brian Koberger, who's suspected, behind bars right now until he stands trial for the Idaho college murders. There's all these podcasts and articles comparing him to Ted Bundy. And I'm like, I got so outraged. I'm like, people need to stop. No joke. One of the podcasts I listened to, they're like, let's compare the differences. They were both male. And I'm like,
yeah.
Like when you start out and that's your first thing.
That's the type of person that puts out an advertisement that's like, come get these puppies, part German Shepherd, part dog. Right? Like, but
it reminded
Russell's got a really good point there. Sorry to cut you off on yours, Russell. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we'll definitely find out more. I mean, you make a good point. I do agree that it wouldn't have been like, oh, gee, now I've come to realization for all the crimes I've did. That we can rule that out.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. Another one of those people that makes you have to look at like, there are things that he said that were brilliant and that I think, and that a good majority of people think, right? But there's just that, then he, just like everything else, it's like you can bitch up a blue streak about society, but nobody ever has an answer. There's no answer to it. We'll just tear each other apart, right? Like any which way we can. We just can't handle it past this. It's like we've gotten to a point now where, we're not throwing fire bombs at each other and we're not like Cairo or anything like that. So everybody's just kind of chill, happiness in slavery sort of thing. But they don't realize just how quick that can go.
Let's see, Russell. Also, dementia or Alzheimer's could have been settling in, causing him to act in ways he wouldn't normally. I didn't read that he had either of those. Not to say he did, and it just wasn't reported in what I was reading, but I couldn't find anything. Hey, Amy. Renee says, well, we can all agree that the world is better off without this murderous asshat. Yeah.
Because he didn't do anything for anyone. Like some people, it's the same. It's similar to Manson. People who get real chuffed up about the people, they're still like criminals who did bad things, and you wouldn't if they didn't have the notoriety, you wouldn't have even listened to one thing they said. They would have been that two-dimensional, that guy's a piece of shit. But because he goes under a microscope and he does have some good points, all of a sudden you have to be like, oh my God, am I a psychopath? Or it's like, what is going on here? You just got to look at a person. It's like this crazy person can have good points. Like, it's just kind of figuring out how to navigate it properly and not end up crazy yourself.
Well, I want to comment on that, but first I'm concerned about Amy.
Oh yeah, fucking rights, Amy.
No, Amy,
yes,
I'm concerned. I think you need a wellness check, or
Danny needs. There's no cure for Danny.
There's no cure for Danny.
Yeah, there's no cure for Danny.
Cure. I am the cure. No, so damn it, what were you saying?
I don't know, something about something.
Oh, well, okay. I think it wasn't because of his ideas that he terrorized the country for spanning several decades. So everybody knew who the Unabomber was. There was all these composite sketches. Nobody was safe. There were some attacks that kind of made sense, but in the end, some packages were being delivered to families. One guy, he opened, I think it was his wife and kid were home, but they happened to walk out of the room, the kitchen or something like that. And then a whole family could have died right away. But I think it's because, again, this spanned over decades. It could have been worse if all the bombs went off as they were designed. But then he was taunting the media, his manifesto. It made him so big that now by the time he was caught, now everybody in the country and outside of the country too was talking about him. If he only sent one bomb and that was all, and didn't do this over decades in his manifesto and taunting the media, not everybody would know who Ted Kaczynski was.
Right. And I mean, not everybody does anymore, but I remember when they were still looking for him. I remember the composite sketches. I remember when they caught him. I remember being like, oh shit, they got him. And yeah, it was crazy.
So he was arrested in 96. So I was 12 years old. I think I remember as a kid seeing the composite sketch like on the news, but that's all I recall. But you're a little bit older than me, so you would have you would have been like a freshman in high school or something like that?
You were how old? 12?
Yeah.
I'm 4 or 5 years older than you?
No, you're not 4 or 5 years old. I'm 38. You're 40.
Oh, I'm 41. Okay, so I'm 3 years older than you. Yeah. If he didn't have a brother, he might not have been caught. Dan, if it hadn't been for his brother and his brother's wife, he wouldn't have been caught. Right? Like that was they recognized what he had been saying and they recognized his writing.
Oh,
yeah,
good Dylan. Good He's point. So young.
I was 4 when he was arrested. Fuck you.
Dylan, I just assume everybody's like around my age, and I hear that and I'm like, oh God, Dylan, we have nothing in common.
My kid he's like talking about stuff. He's talking about my wife and he's like, yeah, she's not that old. And he says, but then there's some other people who are real old. I'm like, what's real old? He's like 41. I'm like, oh, you son of a.
Oh, that's funny. He didn't have Susan Atkins to blab on him.
Nope, sure didn't. He did it right. It stayed on his own. He was just like, nope, everybody stay away from me.
Yeah, when I was doing the research when I covered this episode, which again, if you missed it, I did link the 2 parts down below. But what I always found interesting was who his brother wanted to report him on and be, he wanted anonymity. Oh my God.
Anonymity. Anonymity. Anemone. A sea anemone.
Quitlam. That's all I know.
Yeah. Hey, Robert.
But somehow his name got leaked. So Ted, in the end, knew it was his brother that turned on him.
Right.
I wanted to make a point. I forgot to mention this earlier. So this whole thing of Ted living off the land and he had his family sending him money at points.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like he was saying like, oh, I'm doing all this stuff on my own, but he like faked a disease so his mom would keep sending him money. Right? Like it's just like everyone's so full of shit all the time. It's just like politicians. We're doing all this stuff, but we're really just fucking nepotism and shitty and all this other stuff.
Like he lived quote unquote off the land. There was no electricity, no running water. That is fact. But what would he use his money on? Let's see, all the bomb making equipment. He had his type. There were things that he would use it on, and clearly it was funding a very, very horrible thing.
Yeah, me too, Watson.
Let's see, my son uses the phrase ancient 80s.
Kids and asshats.
Hey, Scotty.
Hey, Scotty.
So, Amy, you definitely should check it out. I recommend it to anybody. I think I covered it in one of my first book recommendations video. You can get it on Amazon for like $10.
It's also on Audible.
It's also on Audible for people like Paul, who I'm just old-fashioned. I like a book.
I do enjoy a book as well, but I couldn't get it today. And that was what I needed it for. So
not my problem. So for those who don't have the actual book, so it's broken up by, every paragraph is a point. So like this, like 0.62, 0.63, 0.64, and it's just so on and so forth through it. So it's written very interestingly. I mean, just definitely.
The publisher, I think, James. I don't think, no family or anything. I don't know.
Think. He never had family.
No, not his brother. His brother wouldn't get anything. No. That's what I'm talking about. That family. Right. He didn't have kids or anything. Awesome. Yeah, there you go. It's only I always listen to them faster too. So it's only like a couple hours. It's a very short listen, but it's yeah. Can you imagine what he's been writing over the years?
From what I read, he did keep in communication and write to people on the outside.
Which is funny considering he wanted to be away from people, but then he gets into prison and he's like, I need human contact. It's like, what the fuck?
The hypocrisy.
Yeah, creeps up. Just more and more. I'm going to fix everything, doing everything exactly the same.
So, Amy, just for you came a little late, and for anybody else that came a little late, also, I would highly recommend, and this has honestly become my favorite true crime book of all time, Madman in the Woods, Life Next Door, the Unabomber by Jimmy Gehring. She grew up right next door with Ted as her neighbor. So you get a very good insight into Ted. So, and her dad helps the FBI with getting him arrested. So he had female groupies writing him.
Of course he did.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Paul, speaking of female groupies writing you, how's the Paulcast Instagram going?
Oh, not that way. Not in that direction at all. Who reads the manifesto on Audible? Randy Quaid? That would be quite poignant if he did, but no, it's just some random person.
Imagine if it was Ed Kemper, because remember he would do books on audio.
Oh, right. Switch one killer out for the other.
Oh man. All right, so we're 48 minutes in, so we've strung you along for a while. So Paul, what do you say we get into the Washington Post article about Ted Kaczynski and mind control?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Would you like to read it, or would you like me to do the honors?
No, I would like you to do the honors. Are you kidding? What? No way.
So I'd be curious, Paul, once I read this, your thought, and everybody in the chat, please, I would like to know your thought. I never really went with Ted Kaczynski being under mind control, MK Ultra, all of that. I know there are quite a few people that do think he is. Hey, small town. Hey, Ella, welcome. So, all right. So let me read this. Paul, keep an eye on the chat and we'll go from there. So the Washington Post, you can check out this article. It's before he was the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski was a mind control test subject. So Ted Kaczynski, the anarchist and so-called Unabomber who died in a federal prison medical facility on Saturday, transformed from boy genius to terrorist, going from a star mathematics student to a feared assailant who targeted academics, scientists, and industrialized society as a whole. Kaczynski entered Harvard University as a 16-year-old on a scholarship after skipping the 6th and 11th grades. It was there that he was subjected to an experiment run by Harvard psychologist Henry A. Murray that was backed by the Central Intelligence Agency, also known as CIA. Though he graduated with a mathematics degree, later completing a doctorate in the field before becoming a professor, questions remain over whether or to what extent he was affected by the experiment, which reportedly involved mock interrogations in which participants' beliefs were harshly disparaged. Murray's study was widely reported to be part of a CIA program codenamed Project MKUltra, inspired by the use of mind control techniques on U.S. prisoners of war in Korea by the Soviet Union, China, and North Korea. The program sought to understand how to control subjects' minds, sometimes using substances such as LSD, according to a document the CIA made publicly available in 2018. There has not been evidence to suggest LSD or similar substances were used at Harvard on Kaczynski. The project attempted to produce a perfect truth drug for use in interrogating suspected Soviet spies during the Cold War, the document says, and generally to explore any other possibilities of mind control. CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of many files related to MKUltra in 1973. Nevertheless, Kaczynski disclosed some of his apparent involvement in the study in correspondence from prison with the professor Alston Chase, who later wrote a book about the Unabomber. Chase argued in a June 2000 article in the Atlantic magazine that Kaczynski's experiments at Harvard, his studies overlapping with his roughly 3-year participation in Murray's experiment, helped create the Unabomber. Thus, Ted Kaczynski's Harvard experiences shaped his anger and legitimized his wrath, wrote Chase, who died in 2022. By the time he graduated, all the elements that would ultimately transform him into the Unabomber were in place. While working for what was a precursor to the CIA, Murray conducted an experiment that put subjects under mock interrogations with blinding spotlights and verbal abuse, Chase wrote, citing a report by the psychologist and his colleagues. The Harvard study also involved asking the participants to write essays explaining their worldviews, which were then picked apart by interrogators, according to the History Channel, which cited Murray's description of the sessions as vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive. Harvard did not immediately respond to request for a comment regarding the study, though there has not been a definitive link between the study and Kaczynski's actions, which killed 3 people and injured 23 others. Some have suggested that the program may have exacerbated his schizophrenia. Quote, the Harvard experiment was stressful and stress aggravates the symptoms of schizophrenia, end quote, the psychologist Nigel Barber told History. Otherwise, it would be a mistake to exaggerate the importance of this experience or to see it as a major determinant in his anti-science and anti-technology political views. Almost done, just a couple more paragraphs. Others argued against placing too much importance on the influence of the study of Kaczynski. The sociologist Ted Kaczynski wrote in the Washington Post review on Chase's book, Harvard and the Unabomber, The Education of an American Terrorist, that the effect of Murray's dubious, unethical experiment on Kaczynski is unknown. In 1995, the Post weighed whether to print the Unabomber's manifesto. With many of the records regarding the study restricted or destroyed, and with questions about peculiar behavior in Kaczynski's childhood, it is unclear whether the study can be clearly tied to Kaczynski's transformation into a domestic terrorist, Gitlin wrote. In his manifesto, published by the Post in 1995 with the encouragement of federal officials, Kaczynski likened science to a surrogate activity that is directed towards an artificial goal that people set up for themselves merely in order to have some goal to work toward or some sense of fulfillment. Scientists work mainly for the fulfillment they get out of the work itself, he wrote. Thus, science marches on blindly without regard to the real welfare of the human race or to any other standard, obedient only to the psychological needs of the scientists and of the government officials and the corporation executives who provide the funds for research.
That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like you get
Mhm.
somebody who's schizophrenic and paranoid, and you put them in situations where they're being interrogated, and like, good luck. Yeah, I think Robert says here, I think Ted was 100% mind fucked by that program. Yeah, I think so too. I don't think it was like it targeted him to do the exact thing that he did, but I think that absolutely, if he had mental health issues anyway, and then they like really hammered on him, then it would have exacerbated it. It would have made him a harder person, and it would have totally, it would have backed up his paranoid thinking.
Yeah, it's, he wasn't diagnosed until years later when he was waiting for trial. So he didn't know he had schizophrenia. I'm sure Harvard didn't know he had schizophrenia. So, I don't really see anybody at fault here. I don't think this experiment made him into the Unabomber. Could it? I feel like that was already there. Could this have been the spark? I could go along with that, but I don't think this caused it.
It could have pushed him towards his political and scientific leanings, that they were willing to do all this horrible shit to him, so they're willing to do anything. Is it emasculating to have Paul on the right screen? Yes. I actually have to tuck when I sit on this side.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Dylan asks a good question. Do you think that Ted considered himself a victim?
I mean, in some instances, I think so. I think that he was one of those people that was all about self-preservation. So I don't think that he would have blamed himself for very much. So, I mean, do I think he considered a full-on, did he have like a victim mentality?
I don't think so.
Not really. I don't think so. But I think that he would have blamed other people before he blamed himself. So that kind of goes into a victim mentality, but not so black and white.
Yeah, he never went so far as to say, this happened to me as a kid and that's why I did this, or this happened to me at this point, or I was bullied, or I was this and that's why I did. Yeah. Never went that route, which a lot of criminals do. They blame it on all these specific things. He never did that.
He just blamed it on society.
Yeah, everything was society. But I wouldn't say he thought himself a victim. I wouldn't say that.
Maybe a victim of society.
I mean, okay, I'll meet you.
I think Russell as well. Yeah, I think his ego was too big for him to consider himself a full-on victim. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he thought he was right and justified in his actions.
Oh, 100%. In his manifesto, that's part of what it was here's what's wrong with society. Here's what's wrong with what's going on in the world. The only way to correct it is by violent means, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yep.
What do you guys think? You guys, everybody in the chat, what are you guys thinking? Do you think that, his experiment that he participated in at Harvard, do you think that was the cause? Do you think that maybe, that was, to me, it was, if anything, I would say it was like a spark that helped light it, but that's as far as I would go. But that's just
it didn't propel him to that. It just added to his extremism, I think, and just how intense of a person he is.
There's a term called, the party you weren't invited to, I guess.
He wanted to get back at the government. He wanted society in general, Beckham. It wasn't even just the government. It was just, he thought that they were, I think he just thought that technology was the government and was society and everything like that. He wanted there to be all these little tiny hamlets, I guess, where they were their own closed units. And yeah, it's weird.
So Dylan, he was diagnosed schizophrenic, but it wasn't until he was awaiting trial that he received that diagnosis. And he still is very adamant of I'm sane. I'm not, I didn't, because his lawyers wanted him to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, and he wouldn't. So,
Right.
but he was diagnosed schizophrenic. No, William,
Amy,
no, it wasn't. He was not sexually turned on by his crimes.
it was just, yeah, God, like Renee said, he had a bit of a God complex.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, was he super into his tests and stuff like that? Like he skipped 2 grades and he was in Harvard doing and then he was teaching in Harvard,
He got
or
a
teacher's
doctorate.
assistant. And yeah, he is a
He had a
smart
high
dude,
IQ.
but crazy as shit. Yeah.
Well,
Tech is the government now. Tech is everything now. And he also talks a lot about, which I think is really interesting, is like media and stuff tricking people into thinking what freedom is, and how like we can be free to do things as long as they don't mess with the forwarding of society, or the forward motion of society, and the forward motion of government and everything like that. It's like things that are benign. You can have benign wins, but you can't have anything that's detrimental to the status quo, which is really interesting. And it's really like, it makes sense. But he's like, but here's this fucking bomb that's not going to do anything. And I'm just a crazy man.
Amy, I feel like super smart people sometimes have a hard time assimilating into society. As I butcher that, I bet he was on the autism spectrum.
It was probably like talking to a bunch of chimpanzees when he talked to anybody, because he was so smart and he thought so much higher. He's like, I am an intellect and you're all idiots.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah.
There's actually the first case I covered on Danny After Dark was Amy Bishop. She was, again, that another case of that fine line between brilliance and insanity. And she was super, super smart. So if you want to go back to my very first episode when I was, oh God, I cringe, but it's still there. And yeah, she like totally went left. And yeah, check out that episode if you aren't familiar with who she is. But yeah, completely insane.
He would have been losing his mind over AI for sure. He would have, Renee. I mean, he kind of called AI.
He did. I was just about to say he did.
Thinking for. He's like, technology is going to think for people. You're going to be able to just punch something in and boom. And so he called it. He called that. He called he called cancel culture, and he called the craziness of the super left, and all sorts of all sorts of stuff. But then took you to crazy town, and so you couldn't go all the way. Yeah, he was 16 when he went to Harvard. 16. I was fucking like a year after eating dirt when I was fucking 16. It's crazy.
God.
Fucking.
Well, it's interesting because, all right, what was the point I was going to make? Oh, something that you said. Oh, another thing too, and he was, one of the things that, again, that he cites is, again, the example I used earlier of where there was this favorite place he liked to go to, and then one day he went to it, and now, land is, the land's gone, it's being built, roads, so on and so forth. And he called that, and if you think about it now, think of where you grew up, or even in the city or town that you live in. There are new developments happening everywhere. So more and more land is being destroyed. Condos are being put in, roads, highways. There's so much housing that everything's squished together. So any land that there is in most places, gone. It's gone. And that was one of the things he was trying to fight against, was the land just being taken over and all these, buildings being built, so on and so forth. And he's right. Look at it now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You live
crazy.
In a place that, like, I'm Boston, so there's not much nature here. Like, there's a little bit, but compared to you,
yeah, But there's even been a huge change since I was a kid to now.
Mm-hmm. And that was what, like 80 years ago, Paul?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that wasn't one of my greatest jokes, but that's all right.
Who else does that part sound like? Yeah, no, him, like, he is what the Manson commune, I think, wished they were after the fact. Like, I guess Lynn pulled a gun on the president, so that's pretty good. But that's what she had been talking about, domestic terrorism and eco-terrorism and stuff like that. That's what he was all about too. But I think he would have been mad at the commune for all the littering that they did with, because I talked to some people who were talking about the family in Death Valley, and they were just going around, and they were like, it was like the tent cities, right? Like they'd stop somewhere and they'd leave a whole bunch of shit and move along, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like, and it's just made a mess. But the point that I didn't get to was that they were what they wanted to be like Kaczynski with the lighting the loader on fire, right? Like they were like, here's my point, like, and they tried to like, but like the tires burned or something like that. Meanwhile, he goes and he's like, here's my point. I'm going to get off the track and I'm going to start blowing stuff up and I'm going to change it. And so it was like, yeah, that's where he was in the same vein. But again, at the same time, just like with the Atwa stuff in practice, there was a lot of hypocrisy to it, because he was messing with people when he was saying that we shouldn't be messing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
He was, and then like they were saying, going on the Atwa thing, they were saying Atwa, and then they were throwing a bunch of used car parts, and I don't think that they were recycling the oil they were pulling out of the dune buggies and stuff, right? Like, so nobody's 100% on anything. Mm-hmm. Nobody's doing it right 100%. There's no way. And then, but it's funny when they're so, what's the word? They're so radicalized, and they're so like, no, this is how it has to be. But they're not even as, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not even as full on as they say that they are, right? Like they're not as good as they're putting forward when it comes to their moral high ground.
That's typically the way it is.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of comparisons to, Kaczynski, and, his view on Atwa, if you will, and then Manson and his commune on Atwa. And they came from, think about it, we all know Manson, from the Paulcast Manson Saga discussion panel, Manson's upbringing. We've gone over that in depth over on that channel. And Manson, think of how he grew up, in and out of jail. I hate to say he never stood a chance, but all the cards were stacked against him. Look at Ted Kaczynski. He had every opportunity. He had the brains. He went to Harvard. He got a doctorate. He was teaching at university. And still look at the end result. He had everything going for him. He could have used a platform so much differently.
Yeah. He had more of the follow through. That's how he ended up killing 3 people and wounding 20, whatever. Because he had that, he just kept going at it, kept hammering at it.
He had intelligence that was rare.
Yeah.
Rare.
Well, they compare him to Einstein and Hawking's, not just in our chat, but in like magazines and stuff like that. They're like, he was a very rare intellect.
Yeah.
But there was that thing there that was just off enough that it made his intellect dangerous.
Let's see. Can you all do an episode on Timothy McVeigh, and then you'll find out that he was total black ops and a pure CIA cutout for the Oklahoma City bombing. I don't know if I'll cover that.
do that one. I can't cover that one because of all the kids.
I was about to say Paul's
There's
no
way.
Paul can't do it.
No, I can't do that one.
Oh, Jesus Christ. King size Reese's. Oh, man.
Those are good. Those are decent.
Hopefully they will study his brain. I agree.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people share, because I've seen that comment on articles that I've been reading about him dying. And a lot of the things are, there will be at least one person being like, you need to study that guy's brain and see what was up, to see if there was any sort of crazy irregularities on account of the experiments they'd done on him.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I was I wonder who has the say in that. Ted didn't really have many family, so his brother?
I mean, maybe. Can't they just do what they want if he's a part of the system? Isn't he just owned by the system that he fought against?
I don't know the logistics behind that. But I hope they do. Amy, I 100% hope they do.
Yeah.
K-Dog. Oh my God. That's so funny. Me and Paul were just talking about that like the other day. The Wonderland murders.
Yeah. The P word is involved. Penis?
Porn.
Oh, yeah. No, that was, I listened to a really good podcast on the Wonderland murders recently that was on Audible. It was interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, we should do one on the Wonderland murders. That'd be a fun one. I mean, get to talk about Liberace.
I was going to say we get to talk about porn. I was going to say I will do plenty of research for that episode.
Oh, yeah. Did they give Ted any type of drugs during the experiments? They never said.
I don't know.
But I don't know. Like, it seems like they probably would have. And then started interrogating him really hard.
Todd, there was, so in the Washington Post article, let me see, because they refer to LSD, but all right.
They were talking about what MK Ultra was. They talked
about
sometimes
so
using, but they didn't say necessarily.
So there has not been evidence to suggest LSD or similar substances were used at Harvard on Kaczynski.
Yeah.
I wanted to get that exact quote, so I did it right. Oh, Jesus Christ. Jason Freeman is Ted's grandson. Oh, Jesus Christ. I was about to say, I quit. I can't go through this again.
Wait till we have Kaczynski, the Bloodlines, or whatever they call it. And then it's just him in a casket and them being like, I miss him. And then just like a close-up of his face. That's me holding a camera. Close-up of his face. Grandpappy. Like,
oh my God. I was going to say, I can't go through that again.
It'll be... I mean, they... to a point, they had it coming, didn't they? Like, it's one of those
Dylan,
things.
He wasn't involved in anything that would have really given him CTE, though.
Right. He wasn't bashed around like a rag doll. He wasn't
a football player, wrestler. No. He was a math kid. Like he
got bludgeoned by knowledge, not by the mat. He got
bludgeoned by knowledge. Did you really say that?
Yeah. So that's the only reason. So he wouldn't have had that sort of stuff. I am sharp as a butter knife. So I bring
you on my channel and you come up with he got bludgeoned by knowledge.
Yes, I did it.
So yeah, if you go, where is it? Yeah, Dylan, like if you go back to, kind of earlier, Ted's growing up and his biography, he wasn't outside playing sports with the kids and all that. He was removed from children. He studied, he was into math. So there was nothing that would have produced something like CTE.
He was a mathlete.
Mm-hmm. He had Was it him who had, oh, there was definitely an injury at birth, but I can't remember what it was.
We'd have to look into that. Maybe he was a diehard Gojira fan and heard his brain headbanging. It's possible.
Oh my God.
They were the topics were right up his alley.
Well, sorry, Dylan. Now that I know you're like basically like a 21-year-old kid, your jokes are different than like us old people. You know.
Old gray mare, she ain't what she used to be.
What the hell was that?
Nothing. Richard Ramirez had a lot of head trauma when he was young.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we're winding down now a little bit, I think, Danny.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
We
was
kind of covered everything with that. And again, so if you guys want to learn a lot more about Richard, God, not Richard. God, I just read that Richard Ramirez comment. Now that name's in my head. About Ted Kaczynski. Again, I linked the episodes. I did 2 parts on Ted Kaczynski. Go back, check those out. His manifesto, it is on Audible, as Paul mentioned, but if you're old school like me, Amazon, like $10, you can get his manifesto. It's a really good read. I do have to say. And yeah, I started reading it. I'm like, I agree. And then you get to a point where it's like, oh, right now it's a sharp left. Yeah. And then also Madman in the Woods, Life Next Door to the Unabomber by Jamie Gehring. Definitely check that out because you get a look at Ted from somebody who grew up knowing him. So something you can't just get that information online. It's someone who had to have been there.
Yeah.
Anything else, Paul?
I have nothing to add. I think that was good. I think I can't believe hopped on the We Sing train. I mean, you know, you can't have expectations for me because I'll blow them out of the water.
Renee says we are all math nerds. We do math just for I don't do math for fun.
I would, but I would get all of the questions wrong.
Oh, thank you, Robert. That is very kind. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. So, yeah, this was a good one. It's an interesting topic. I actually am interested in this, so that's why I'm actually doing something, because it's a one that gets me. One of the few and far between.
The last case that got you that I had you on for was Jodi Arias. Gee, I wonder what got you into that case.
God's loophole.
On that note, everybody.
If you don't know what that is, go look it up. It has to do with Mormon. Anyway.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Paul, from the Paulcast, for joining me for tonight's episode. And until next time, everybody, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.